Hey guys, Ben with Breaking the 1% here. Thanks for tuning in tonight. I was going to make a quick video tonight. I had gotten a few questions in our BTOP Ultimate Blogging group, our private Facebook group, about people wanting to know a little bit about our Tailwind strategy, the scheduler that we use to schedule our Pinterest pins. And so I was going to kind of give everyone just a general overview of what we do, and then we got a few questions in the group that I'll try to get to towards the end of the video here. Some of the questions will get answered as I make the video, so that's why I'm going to save them to the end and kind of just do a little recap and see if I knock them all out. But anyways, what I've got up here on the screen is actually the dashboard for our dollarsprout.com Tailwind account, and the reason I chose to show you guys this is because I've pretty much went through and I've wiped out the entire account. I don't have any pins scheduled. I am literally starting fresh so that you guys can kind of get an idea of what I do on a daily basis. I do it on a daily basis. You guys are not required to or expected to do this on a daily basis. You can get in here once a week. You can get in here once a month, but I like to kind of just get a general overview of what's going on a daily basis. But anyhow, so like I said, I'm going to kind of give you a general overview of Tailwind, how we schedule our content, and then if that inspires you to do things a little bit differently. There's no hard and fast rules to Tailwind. There's no hard and fast rules to Pinterest. So you can kind of take what you want, take everything with a grain of salt, and we'll go from there. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing that I typically do on a daily basis is to kind of analyze how my current pins are performing. I'm going to go ahead and just give you guys a general overview of my account. We kind of just opened our dollarsprout.com Pinterest account about just over 2 months ago now. And then these are our numbers. You can kind of see how often we're pinning and that kind of thing. We've pinned 826 times over the last 2.5, 3 months. And as you can see, we've gained about 3,000 repins from those pins. So if it gives you any perspective, I think we started on October 14th, so really about 3 months now. And we've pinned about 900 times. So really not that many. We're pinning about 10 times a day right now on average. And we're on average getting, it looks like, about 3.5 repins for every pin. So this is just kind of a generic overview of our account. We've got 150 followers right now, and I think we're getting about 40,000 hits a month off of 150 followers. People are thinking, how in the world do you get 40,000 hits a month off of 150 followers? Again, that's what's pretty cool about Pinterest. I think that you can take just a small following, and then that web effect of repinning can really increase the number of eyeballs on your content. So yeah, just 150 followers, and we've gotten about 40,000 hits a month right now. So we get this question all the time: how do you get more followers? How do you get more followers? And I'm here to tell you that while followers do still matter to some extent, and I'll cover that a little bit later in the video, they're definitely not as important as people probably think they are. Pinterest has taken huge strides to reduce the whole follow unfollow tactic that you've seen in the past. They have taken away the focus on followers, the focus on pin counts, and they're trying to make it a platform about quality. And that's what's pretty neat about it, is that, again, 40,000 hits, 150 followers, definitely does not matter how many followers you have. However, they do help, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But anyways, like I said, the first thing I like to do on a daily basis is to kind of get an idea of how our content is currently performing. So what I'm going to do here is I think I have a tab already open. Yeah, here we go. It's our pin inspector. And so this just kind of gives us a broad overview of how things are doing. You can go and look day by day. You can look week by week, month by month. But right now I have it sorted on a month by month basis. As you can see, I'm looking at pins that were scheduled after the first of the year. So this is a pretty recent video. And I am kind of getting a general idea of how my content is performing overall. I don't want, a day-by-day account of it, because there's just too much variability. So one day a pin can get 1 repin, another day it can get 50. So by looking at a decent chunk of data, you can get an idea of how your pins are doing overall without getting, false data from outliers. So I'm going to just show you guys kind of a quick overview of this page. These are basically sorted by repin. So these are my most popular pins over the last month. And then we're going to kind of take an idea or take a look at which boards they're going to. And as you can see here, our first and most popular pin is an article that Jeff recently wrote. Actually, it was one of our other writers that wrote, but Jeff edited. And it was posted to our best of board and got 80. This singular pin got 86 repins. So this single pin was repinned 86 times, and that is likely a result of our followers. A couple of our followers probably got it out there originally, and then it kind of took off from there. And we have a little bit of fitness content, as you can see. We're obviously very, very finance dominated, although we do have a few fitness oriented pieces that typically tie back into our fitness niche, or excuse me, our personal finance niche. Excuse me. So yeah, even our personal finance content typically ties back in some way or another, whether it be, workouts that are cheap, workouts that you can do from home to save money, that kind of thing. But as you can see, this is kind of a list of our most popular, our best performing pins. All of these are individual URLs, meaning, this pin was repinned 25 times from this board alone. So that's a pretty good ratio. And so what I like to do as I scan down this list is I look for repeats. I look, this is the second time that you've seen this pin, so that you know that the first time was likely not a fluke. Multiple iterations of this pin have done well. So I'm going to keep scanning down the list, and I see a second iteration of this pin, and I see a third and fourth iteration of that pin. And so, and the Swagbucks pin that the paid surveys pin that we have is also doing, decently. So what I'm doing as I scan down this page is I'm looking for trends. I'm trying to identify, do I have 5 to 10 pins that I could pin on a frequent basis that'll consistently perform well. So that's what I'm kind of trying to do. And I'm actually going to go ahead and expand my date range here a little bit. Let me scroll up here again. I'm going to go ahead and do basically since October, since we started. And so again, I'm looking for trends. Which content do I have that is consistently performing well? And then those are the pins that I want to try to get out more often. So as you can see, as I scan down this page, this 21-day money saving challenge, that pin is doing well on a consistent basis. This pin right here has done fairly well, although that's more time sensitive. Obviously, this is a very resolution oriented pin. And then this save money pin that for an article we wrote, we have a couple A/B testing here. They split right down the middle for that A/B test. We have a couple. So that pin again is showing up multiple times, and what that's telling me is that it wasn't a fluke. This pin is doing quite well over multiple different experiments, different boards, stuff like that. So what I'm doing is I'm making a mental note of about 5 to 10 pins that I want to try to get out, on a daily basis. These are my highest performers. The Save Money Challenge has done quite well. Again, this pin right here has been a very good performer for us. This one actually went mini viral for a couple of days, and we got several thousand hits from it. But I'm scrolling down this list and identifying pins. And so what I've done is, I know you guys can't see this, but I went ahead and I made a list of pins that are doing quite well. And so I made a list of about 10 pins, and those pins I typically save to a secret board. I just make a blank secret board on our account. And then that way I kind of have an idea of which pins were doing really well. And those are the pins that I, make a mental note to try to get out more often, because they're the ones that are driving traffic. I like to pull up a tab often with my Google Analytics and see if this pin, for example, is getting 86 repins. Well, how much traffic is it driving? Is it getting 86 repins and only 10 clicks? Is it getting 86 repins and 150 clicks? At the end of the day, I want repins, but I also want traffic. And so I try to match up, is this pin sending me traffic, or is it just getting me repins? And so once I've got a list of about 5 to 10 good pins, I make a secret board. And those are the pins that I'm trying to get out more often, than normal. I still get out some of my underperforming pins to try to give them a chance. And then, if I've given them a chance for a couple weeks and they're not really taking off, I don't pin those as often. But yeah, and so that is kind of how I decide which content I want to get out. And then if I have a new pin that I'm trying to introduce to boards, I will also tack that pin or those pins onto that board of 5 to 10 popular pins. And that way they're getting out there, they're getting out to my group boards. I'm testing the waters and seeing how they do. So now that I've got a list of 5 or 10 pins, and you can do this with your own account, you kind of identify those pins. I'm going to pull up our group boards. I've got another tab here opened with our group boards. And what I do is I make a list of group boards that typically perform well, both historically and recently. And so what I'm going to do here real quick, I know I showed this in another video, but I'm going to take a couple minutes to show it here, is I'm on probably, let me see here, I pulled it up real quick. This is a brand new account, and Jeff and I are sending outreach emails now to try to get on more group boards. But I'm on, it's like 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 30, about 32 group boards of varying levels of quality. When we first started applying to group boards, we basically cast a wide net. We apply to as many as possible, and then I get here in Tailwind and I look at how high quality they are. I don't usually leave boards. Someone had asked me that question. I don't normally leave boards, but I don't often pin to them if I don't think they're quality. So what I'll do is I'm going to take a quick peek at these 32 boards and kind of make up a plan about which ones I'm going to pin to. So I'm actually going to open up a notepad here real quick. This is just for the sake of showing you all. And this is something I talked about in the other video, but however many quality boards you have dictates how often you're going to be pinning each day. There's no point in pinning 150 times a day to crappy boards, just like there's no point in only pinning 2 times a day. It's just not going to be enough exposure to get traffic. So the answer is you look at how many quality boards you have, and then you kind of look at those boards and see what their rules are, and that kind of dictates how many pins per day you're going to be doing. And so what I'm going to do real quick is this is going to be a very quick down and dirty for the sake of this video not being 3 hours long, but I'm going to identify some boards and kind of give you an idea of how I'm going to pin to them. So for example, I'd like to sort my list by repins in the last 7 days. You can also sort it by virality or engagement score, but I'll get a little bit into why I sort it by the last 7 days. So real quick, the virality score is actually a measure of, again, repins over the number of pins. So you can see with this first account here, it's got 35,000 repins, and its lifetime, the lifetime metrics of this board have 35,000 repins over 5,000 pins. So on average, a pin on this board gets 6 repins. But that's a historical measure. That's not necessarily an indicator of how good that board is right now. So what I like to do is I like to do a virality score over the last 7 days. I've actually asked Tailwind for this feature to calculate a more recent virality score to see how a pin is performing right now versus how it was performing in the past. And they said it was a good idea, but I'm still hoping they get back to me on that one. So just a quick little bit of math here, just so you guys can see. But if you do 267, the number of repins in the last 7 days versus the number of repins, the number of pins in the last 7 days, 267 divided by 139 is approximately 2. So you can see that the repin rate of this board in the last 7 days is 2.0. So if you were to take an Excel spreadsheet, for example, and highlight all this information and paste it and then kind of extrapolate it down, it's a little bit tedious because I can't just highlight, or else I would do it for you all. But essentially, take this entire column, divide it by this column, you would get a virality score for the running 7 days. And that is more of an accurate picture of how a board is performing right now versus how it was performing in the past. Boards tend to get lower in quality as time goes on, typically because the board owners invite more collaborators, and then as the number of collaborators goes up, the number of pins that go to the board goes up, and it typically becomes harder to moderate and they become more spam oriented. So I like to find boards that have a lower number of contributors. There's no hard and fast number, but I like to try to stay below 25 if I can. But again, there's no hard rules. If you see boards with 1,000 contributors, you're pretty much wasting your time because it's going to be a spam board. Doesn't matter if there's a 50,000 followers or 100,000 followers on the board. If there's 1,000 contributors, I promise you that board is spam. So don't waste your time. But anyways, so yeah, virality rate last 7 days 2.0. This one for the last 7 days for the social media marketing, it's about 0.75. Blogging tips and tricks, you're looking at about 0.95. Frugal freebies for mom, you're looking at about 0.75. And so what I'm looking for, this virality score is all niche dependent. If you're in a fitness niche, for example, I would expect these virality scores, I would like my last 7 days to be all above 2 and 3 repins per pin. For finance, if you're looking at finance boards, if you're in the finance niche like we are, a repin rate of anywhere at or above 1 is fantastic for the finance niche. It's very difficult to find finance-oriented boards that have a recent repin rate of above 1. So if you find a board that is above 1, you should be pinning as often to that board as the rules allow you. So for example, this best money management tips board, this board is getting around 2.0 repins per pin. That's pretty good for the finance niche. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up that board. Go ahead and look at it. Best money management tips. I just, searched and found it. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to read the rules here. So it says limit 2 pins per day, no repeats in 30 days. So you know that you want to be pinning to this board about 2 times a day. To get the most out of this board. It's engaging well. It's one of my, highest performing finance boards. Unfortunately, there's rules in place that prohibit people from pinning too often, and that's a good thing. The reason that this board is high quality is because the board owner is limiting, users to only pinning 2 times per day with no duplicates. That is, keeping fresh content without duplicates on that board. So if you're wondering why this board is performing pretty well, here you go. It's got good rules in place. And so in order to determine if you should, maximize that 2 pins per day rule, I kind of want to see how fast this board is moving. In the last 7 days, it's only gotten 140 repins, or excuse me, 140 new pins. So if you were to kind of just do some quick math, you can see that works out to about 20 new pins per day. There's only about 20 new pins per day going to this board. So if you're pinning 2 times a day to that board, you're constituting 10% of all the pins. And so 2 pins per day is probably about the max. If you think about it, as you're scrolling down your news feed, if you're on a desktop, you can probably see about 10 to 20 pins at a time. And so if 2 of your pins are those 20 pins every day, you're kind of cluttering the news feed. So just be wary of how fast a board is moving. Even if the rules say that you can pin 5 times a day, that those users are going to get saturated with your pins and not click on them as often if all they ever see are your pins. So this board is moving just barely fast enough to constitute 2 pins a day. But you do want to pin 2 times a day because it's performing well. So this is how you kind of construct how often you should be pinning per day. And I basically repeat that process down this list until I get a number. And if that count comes up to 30 pins a day or 40 pins a day, that's how many times a day I'm pinning. I'm looking, within the board rules and how often I should be pinning based on how good the account is performing. So I'm gonna go ahead and skip. I'm gonna stick to strictly personal finance content just so we can get an idea of what's going on here. So best money management tips. I'm going to go ahead and write that one down. I'm going to do 2x pins per day. So that way I know that I have one run group board that I'm going to be pinning 2 times per day, and we're going to only do finance ones for now. And then we're going to kind of go down my account real quick, and I'm going to come up with a decent little list here. So frugal freebies for mom. Again, it's averaging about 0.75 to 0.8. That's not terrible. The closer to 1, the better. So that's one of my better performing finance boards for this account. I haven't had much time to get on, group boards for this account, so I'm working with what I got right now. The historical average is 3, but it's not performing as well as its historical average, but it's still good enough for me to get traffic from it. So I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of this one too. So I'm going to pull up that group board as well. I'm just switching back to Pinterest for a moment. I'm going to find frugal freebies for mom. And so there are no rules on this group board. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to be respectful of the fact that there are no rules, but I also want to get my content out there as much as possible without spamming. And so again, I'm looking at this board and I see that there are about 30 new pins a day. And so if I pin 4 times a day, I'm going to overwhelm that board. It's just going to be me spamming the board. So I try to stay within reason. So I'm going to say I can do 2 pins a day to this one too. So I'm going to write frugal freebies for mom on this one. $2x pins per day. So now I'm up to 4 pins per day because I'm trying to pick, finance boards that are of remotely high quality, and I'm deciding how many pins I'm going to pin to each board per day. And so the next one on the list is this board called Personal Finance Tips. These are all finance-related boards. This one has a historical average of 2 repins or 1.87 repins per pin, and then over the last week, it's been outperforming its historical average by a ton. It looks like it's about 20 to almost 20 to 1 right now. So 20 repins for every pin. Now you have to take that with a grain of salt. Not every pin on that board is performing that well. It's likely biased by a pin on that board that went viral. So there's probably a pin on that board that has gotten the vast majority of those pins. Someone made a very well-designed pin. I haven't actually looked and seen what it was. There's no way for me to really tell. But someone on that board pinned something that went viral, and it's gotten about 1,000 repins over the last week. That being said, I think that this board typically, outlier aside, this board typically performs well. I think it's right around 1 or so. And so I'm going to add a couple pins per day to this board. However, looking at it, it only gets about 10 new pins per day, not even about 9 per day. So you could really only pin about 1 time per day to that board. So I'm going to go ahead and put that one up there. Personal finance tips. I'm going to do 1 time pins per day, because if you're pinning 3 or 4 times per day, you're going to be the only contributor to that board. Oops, so I'm going to put that up here. I'm actually going to delete these numbers so you can see. And there's a reason why I'm putting them in this order, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then continuing down the list, this board has barely enough activity for me to justify pinning on it, so I'm going to pass on that one. This one is, again, it's only getting about 2 pins per day and not driving much traffic. I'm going to pass on that one. Looking at increasing income here, it looks like it's got a repin ratio of about 0.3 this week. Typically, it's right around 1.5, so it's definitely performing below its average. It's got 7,000 followers, but I'm guessing that this board has gained contributors over the last few months, and it's losing its quality. Now, that being said, if I don't pin to some account, some boards that are not of the highest quality, then I'm kind of crippling the amount of traffic that I can get. So I'm trying to stay on boards that pin at 0.3 from 0.3 virality to 1 or higher. Anything above 1 is an automatic for the finance niche. And if you can stay above 0.3 or higher, you're doing decent. So this one gets about 45 to 50 pins per day. So if I pinned twice per day to this board, I won't overwhelm the board. So I'm going to go ahead and put that one on here. I'm going to do increasing income 2x pins per day. And so now we're up to 7 pins per day. I'm going to keep scrolling down the list as we kind of, again, this board is not moving very fast. I'm going to kind of pass over that one. Saving money here, its virality rate this week is right around 0.08, which is very, very low. This is an example of a board that's not performing well this week. It might be performing better later on, but I'm going to pass on it this week just because it's just not. I'm hurting my account by pinning pins that get no engagement. This budgeting group board looks like we're sitting at right around 0.15 to 0.2, so really not that great. I'm going to pass on that one. Our personal finance board, this board is the most finicky board sometimes. It looks like lifetime, we're looking at 0.61. And then this week, we are well below that 0.1. Jeff and I created this board before we understood the implication of inviting a ton of contributors. And so in order for me to kind of clean up this board, it would likely involve kicking off some of the poorer contributors. I'm not really a fan of doing that just because people have worked hard to get on it, and it does provide some value to people, so I'm going to let it kind of go for now. But I myself don't even pin to it recently just because it hasn't been performing that well. There was a week or so in late December where this board was performing extremely well, and we were getting 3-to-1 repin counts. And you can see that reflected on some of our individual pins. So I'm going to continue down the list. Some of these boards are highly inactive. These are boards that we applied to. We wanted to see how well they were performing, and they were not performing as good as we had hoped, so we're not pinning to them. So you come down to this all things money board. Its repin ratio, its virality score this week, it looks like it's right around 0.75, 0.65 to 0.75 somewhere. So it's actually outperforming its historical average, and it's 0.6 to 0.7 for personal finance is not the worst I've had. So I'm going to take a gander at how often I should be pinning to this board. It looks like it's getting about 208 pins per week, which is about 30 per day. So if I contribute 1 to 2 a day, I'm contributing right around 10% or so, which is not terrible. I mean, our pins are going to be showing up 1 in every 10 pins, so we're not overcrowding the board too much. So I'm going to go ahead and put down 2 pins for this one as well. Money. Pins per day. So you can see we're up to 9 pins per day now. Money saving bloggers. This one is a little bit faster moving. It's averaging about 0.6 this week, which is not terrible for the finance niche. So and it's moving pretty quickly. It's getting about 100 pins per day. So I'd say you could probably do 3 pins per day. That's only 3% of the total board. You're not overwhelming it. You're not inundating the readers with your same pins over and over. I try to have a good variety of pins going out. I try to pick my best performing 10 to 15 pins, so I'm not completely, pinning the same thing over and over. So I'm going to do 3 times a day to money saving bloggers. I'm going to double check the rules on that board real quick just to make sure that they allow 3 times per day. Sometimes they do not. I don't have them all memorized off the top of my head. So there are no specified rules. This board does say no double content. And so what I will typically do with this is I will create a list of pins and then have them go out, and then I'll create a new list of pins just so I'm trying to avoid duplicate content. But there are no daily rules, so I'll still do 3 a day, and then I'll try to cycle through all of my pins. And so I'll leave them on the list, and I'll go back to my boards list here. And I'm going to kind of scroll down a little bit more. Again, looking for finance-oriented content. I found 2 more here. Personal finance how-to. I'm going to go through these last few ones really fast because I'm getting repetitive here, but you get the idea behind how this is working. Personal finance how-to is getting about 0.3, and money management masterminds is doing about 0.75, which is pretty good. So I'm actually just going to put the money management masterminds on here just so we can kind of get a roll on this. But you can see about 30 a day, so 2 a day is less than 10% of the overall volume of the board, so I'm not spamming the board. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on there. So as you can see, and I'm going to cut off the rest here, but you get kind of how it's working. It looks like there's about 10 more boards to go. This is how I dictate how often I should be pinning based on the boards that I'm on. So looks like we are up to about 14 pins per day based on the group boards that I'm on. I also pin to my personal boards as well. Let's see here. I'm going to go back to my account. If it'll let me. I also have a number of personal boards that I like to pin to once a day. And so as you can see, I have a make money tips and ideas board, a how to make money online board, and a blogging hubs tips and tricks board. Those are like personal boards that I pin others' content to. You can see on some of these profiles here, I'm pinning other people's content to those boards, and I'm trying to rank for those keywords after time. Right now I'm only pinning one new pin to those boards a day. The purpose behind that is I'm trying to keep them active with fresh content, but I'm not trying to overwhelm my readers by pinning tons of content to those boards. So I typically like to pin other people's content to those boards. I look for pins that I think are performing well, and I pin to those boards as well. But I'm trying to stick to group boards just for the sake of this. So yeah, I typically only pin my own content to group boards, and I'd like to pin other people's content to my personal boards. So now that I've kind of dictated that I'm going to be pinning 14 times per day, rather than individually pin 14 pins per day, there's a couple options in Tailwind where you can kind of speed up the process. And so for anyone that's familiar with Tailwind, you have the option to create what are called board lists. So I'm actually going to go ahead and delete these just for the sake of showing you all how to kind of quickly schedule your pins. So I'm going to create a couple lists here real quick. I'm going to do money, one pin per day. So I'm going to make that the name of the board. Whoops, I put that in the wrong spot. So that is the name of this list. And I'm going to add personal finance tips to that board. So now I know that this is a board that I can only pin one time per day. I'm going to do another one. Money, 2 pin per day. So this is a list of the boards that I can pin 2 times per day. And last but not least, I'm going to create one more money-oriented pin list. And this is the board that I can do 3 times. And so what this does is by creating these lists, it basically gives me the option to schedule 14 pins per day in about 3 seconds. And you're going to see how I do it here in just a second. But what I do is I go to, I have my pin inspector already open. So I look for the pins that have been performing the best, and I try to send those out as frequently as I possibly can. So if I'm going to send 14 pins out tonight, I would go ahead and schedule. This is my best performing pin right now in the last month. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that one, trying to keep going. I'm going to schedule a repin. Oops. I'm going to save it as a draft. I'm going to find my other best performing pins here. I'm going to go ahead and this is another one that's been doing really good well. So I'm going to go ahead and reschedule this one, save it to a draft. And I'm going to do this one, save it to a draft. And I'm going to come back to our publish where my drafts are. And so by having these lists, I can schedule all 14 of these pins in just a matter of seconds. So right now I know that I should be doing 14 pins per day. So I'm going to go ahead and change my my queue to schedule 14 pins per day. Sorry, I'm doing all these. I haven't done this in a while, and I'm doing this fresh here, so it's taking me a second to remember how to do everything here. So I'm going to do 14. I'm going to generate a new smart schedule. And so now my Monday has 14 pins, Tuesday's got approximately 14, and they're all the optimized time slots. I'm not sure if I've addressed this yet, but Pinterest chooses these spots, or excuse me, Tailwind chooses these slots based on how well your content has been doing at these times and how popular the category is at these times. So finance is kind of the oddball out because there's no category on Pinterest for it. So I'm not quite sure how accurate these are for the category, but these are reflective of how well my content typically does at these times. So these slots are optimized towards how well my pins have performed in the past, and it automatically generates a schedule based on that. So I've got my schedule generated. It's going to do 14 a day. I'm going to pull up my drafts here, and I'm going to go ahead and add these pins to my group boards for tonight. I'm only just going to send these 3 out for tonight. I'm going to have this one go to my 1 pin per day board. I'm going to have this one go to my 2 pins per day boards, and I'm going to have this one go to my 3 pins per day board. And so I'm going to pull it up here. So right now I'm going to go ahead and add these to my queue. This is going to schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total pins. I'm going to add those. And they're on my queue. And then I'm going to go back to my pin inspector. I'm going to schedule these for a few more. I'm going to do this one as well. So I'm going to go back to my drafts. And I'm going to have these go to my 2 pins per day. And this one go to my 3 pins per day. I'm going to add those to the queue. So we've got 12 pins scheduled, and then if I wanted to finish it off, or excuse me, 13 scheduled, and if I wanted to finish it off, I could go schedule 1 more to that 1 board that has 3 pins per day. The only reason it's going on to tomorrow is because it's so late at night. I've already missed part of today. So if I could drag all of these till tomorrow if I wanted. But the point is, I scheduled 14 pins to my most popular boards at my most popular time. And you can kind of extrapolate all of that to your own personal accounts. If you've got 10 quality group boards, if you've got 30 quality group boards, you can kind of apply those same principles, and it kind of dictates how many times per day you should be pinning. If you've got more group boards than I do, you say you've got 40 quality group boards that you can pin 2 times a day to, that's 80 pins per day. So there's really no hard or fast number. It's kind of based on how high quality your boards are. I will say that Tailwind has publicly said that typically accounts that go over 50 pins per day don't perform as well. And that's probably based off billions of pins of data. So I will definitely give some credit to that. I typically hover around 40 to 50 pins per day on my other accounts. I do know for a fact that there are users pinning anywhere from 100 to 300 times a day and getting phenomenal results. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Chasing Foxes. They're pinning upwards of 200 times a day. They're also on very, very good group boards, and they're getting several million hits a month. So just because they're pinning more than 50 times a day doesn't mean that Pinterest is going to ban you or anything like that. They've got a very diverse selection of pins, so they're not pinning the same content over and over and over, and they're on a very large number of very good group boards. So they can get away with pinning 200 to 300 times a day, which is insane, but I think there are well over 100,000 pins on their account. But it just goes to show that, if you're pinning the same piece of content 300 times a day, it's probably going to raise some red flags with Pinterest, and you might get suspended. But if you've got 40, 50, 60 performing, well-performing pins, and you want to post that many times a day, then you might be able to pull it off. But yeah, so just, word for the wise. The group boards that I'm on right now dictate that I can only pin about 20 or so times a day, without, sacrificing quality. So anyhow, that's kind of just a very quick overview of how you can schedule pins, taking into account the data that Tailwind provides, but also doing it kind of quickly. It took me a little bit longer to explain it just because I was showing you, but all in all, it takes me about 5 minutes to look at my pin inspector, see which content is performing well, and then see which boards are performing well, and then schedule my content. And I try to switch up the pins on a daily basis or a weekly basis as well. So now I want to take just a couple minutes and respond to the questions that we got in our group and see if I covered any one of them. Let's see here. So I'm going to go with Steph first. Steph asked, other than following the rules for each Tailwind tribe, do you have any recommendations on how often or what time of day to add your pins to the tribes? My answer for that is obviously yes, you're going to follow the rules. But you kind of want to think about tribes as you would the smart feed generator, or excuse me, the smart scheduler. People are going to typically be most active in the late night hours in the United States. Their largest user base is obviously the United States, and so typically Pinterest is the most active between 6 and 11 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in a different time zone, I'm sorry, you'll have to kind of work around that. But between 6 and 11 p.m. Eastern is typically when Pinterest is most active. I like to schedule my pins on the latter half of that time range, and I'll tell you why, especially in tribes and on my group boards. And the reason being is I like to schedule between 9 and 11 because, one, that happens to be the peak, and I try to err towards the 9 to 11 side because, one, the most sets of eyeballs are on it at that time, and then two, pinning drops off drastically after about 1 a.m. Eastern. And so if I pin to a group board or I pin to a tribe around 11 to 12 p.m. into 12 a.m., my pin happens to sit on the top of that tribe or happens to sit on the top of that group board throughout the night. Since there's not many pins pushing my pins down, I get the benefit of a lot of eyeballs between 9 and 11, but I also get the benefit of staying there throughout the night. So this is kind of like a pro tip that I'm sharing with you guys. I highly recommend it. But try to pin at that hour, especially in your tribes, because there is a different set of eyeballs around the world that will see your content in the wee early morning hours, and so you're hitting a different segment or you're hitting a different part of your audience. You have the added benefit of hitting the East Coast, West Coast of the United States, and then you get some of the Asian and Euro countries kind of waking up in the morning by pinning at that hour. So you're hitting a different segment of your audience. You're not hitting the same group of eyes all the time. So that's personally when I like to do it. That's what I would recommend for a lot of you guys too. So I think that hopefully answers your question, Steph. How often or what time of day? So yeah, definitely late night Eastern is when I do it. And I try to sprinkle, pins to my tribes at all hours of the day as well, just again to hit a different segment of my audience that hasn't seen that pin before. And so I'll move on to Vivian. Vivian says, how many group boards can you join before the law of diminishing returns starts kicking in? If there's such a thing with Pinterest, should you be trying to get on as many possible? My answer to that question is I try to get on as many group boards as time allows so that I can see the quality of the board. I will be on I think some of my accounts are on over 100 boards, but I only pinned like 10 to 15 boards max on some of them, just because some of them are just very low quality. Some of them have too many contributors, and they've turned into kind of spam-oriented boards. So yes, I will join 150 boards, but I'll typically only pin like 10 to 15 of them, my highest quality ones. As far as the law of diminishing returns, again, Tailwind has exclusive access to Pinterest's API. And by exclusive, I mean they're an approved API partner. They're actually allowed to utilize the data that Pinterest has, that Pinterest's API distributes. And so they do have data, a lot of data, billions of pins worth of data likely. And they say that they see diminishing returns after 50 pins per day. I'm not sure if that's applicable to group boards. I don't think that there's probably any sort of law of diminishing returns for group boards. So I'd say you could probably join as many as you'd like, but I typically pin only to the highest quality ones. So yeah, it looks like I've answered that one. And then I'm going to go up to Tana's because hers was the last one. It says, I have one, thought it might be general. Can you show how you schedule your Tailwind pins for the week or however long? I have a general method, but everyone's got their own method. For example, you've shown us how to figure out which of your group boards are worthwhile, but then what? How often do you pin to them? Do you never pin to the rest? Or how do you throw them a bone once in a while? If I'm missing some key methodology pinning. All right, cool. So it looks like I've definitely addressed a good number of those questions. I'll kind of pick them apart here real quick. Again, I did in my other video show you which boards were quality boards, and I kind of addressed that again here. Again, I don't pin to boards that I feel are super low quality. That will vary widely beyond, for different niches. I know for the personal finance niche, if you're hitting, again, one repin for every pin is pretty good. So if you're getting more than that on a certain board, I would definitely pin to that board. And if you're getting less than that, it's where I start to throttle things and kind of determine, do I still want to be keeping, still want to pin to that board. So yeah, definitely don't pin to the low quality boards. I do keep an eye on them. Boards do sometimes change. Every once in a while, you'll see a board become more active. That personal finance tips boards that had that one viral pin may be looked at favorably by Pinterest's algorithm, and they might start displaying that board more often. And so that's definitely something you want to keep in mind, is that a board's quality may occasionally go up in quality, and so it may be worth checking in on it every once in a while and determining whether or not you should start pinning to that board again. So yeah, that's kind of addresses that point. I'm just kind of looking over your question here. How often do you pin to them? We kind of talked about that. A lot of it has to do with the rules and the speed. I will pin as often as the rules allow, and as long as the speed allows it as well. So if the rules say I can pin 5 times a day, but there's only 5 pins per day to that board because it's a slow-moving board, I won't do it. So kind of depends. For every 100 pins per day, I will typically pin 3 pins. So if a board is getting 100 pins per day, I will pin 3 pins. That's about 3%. I'm not overwhelming the group. And as long as it's within the rules, it kind of maximizes how many pins per day. I don't typically pin more than like 5 pins per day to the board, even if the rules say you can do unlimited. Because I don't want to get audience fatigue. If it's a fast-moving board and it's only got 10,000 followers, if I were to pin 5 times a day, that's a ton of impressions. I'm going to fatigue that audience really quickly. So I typically don't ever pin to a board more than 4 times a day. I don't think I have any of my accounts. So that kind of is just another tidbit of information. Do you never pin to the rest? You throw them a bone. If I'm missing anything, key methodology. So I think I've addressed most of your questions. If I haven't, you can just always ask me a follow-up as well. And I think that's pretty much it. That is a very quick, although it wasn't very quick. I'm sure this video is probably almost 45 minutes now. Down and dirty of how I analyze the boards I'm on, how I determine how many pins per day I'm going to do to that board, and then how I quickly schedule them. I am actually not a fan of using lists. I know that some people are, because it helps them schedule pins very, very, very quickly. I will typically go through and go to my pin inspector and look at how each individual pin was doing on which board. I lost my pin inspector here, but I'll pull it up quick. And I'll kind of give you a more close overview in the last 2 minutes here. I like to, again, look at a month time frame. And I will actually be a little more tedious in my pinning because I have a little more time to do it. But for example, I'll kind of go down here and I see that this particular pin did well on this particular board. And so I will actually individually repin this pin at this time until I start seeing diminishing returns. So if I pin this pin the very next night at 11:15 and it does good again at that time, I'll keep doing that until I see it start to decline. So I will actually go board by board and pin. It's very tedious, it's very time consuming. I don't recommend it if you're short on time, but it's the way I maximize my return. So if I see that this pin did really well on this board at a certain time, I will try it again the following night at the same time and say it gets 25 repins again the next night, which is fantastic. 25 to 1 for finance, incredible. So I'll try it until I keep getting, again, that law of diminishing returns. So that's kind of an idea of how I do it. I will one by one schedule my pins. even if it takes me hours sometimes to try to really maximize the effect that I'm getting. And so, as you can see from my general account overview, I'm getting about 3 to 1 in the finance niche, which is not terrible. So I won't complain about it. And again, we're getting about 40,000 hits a month off of that. So that's kind of, again, just a general overview. I'm sure there'll be a lot of follow-up questions. You are free to ask them in the BTOP Ultimate Blogging Group. Just Facebook it, BTOP Ultimate Blogging Group. Or you can comment on YouTube, where I'm going to upload this video now. And leave us a comment. If you haven't, definitely subscribe. Please, please, please subscribe. I'm going to try to do more videos. This one turned out to be a little bit longer than I anticipated. It's not easy to talk strategy in any short amount of time. So again, check us out on YouTube. It's Breaking the 1%. Subscribe. If you have any questions, you can hit us up in the comments there or hit us up in the group. There's a lot here to digest. So yeah, leave a comment. I'll try to get back to it, and maybe I'll make another follow-up video. Anyhow, you guys have a good one. See ya.